Jope. Thank you, everyone. Thank you all again. Just before I launch into my presentation, there's a few technical things I'm going to have to do when I share my screen. But I also noticed that our solid waste advisor, Susanna Telakau from Tuvalu, who's basically still stuck there, she'll be presenting tomorrow. She's just joined us as well. So she's online. I don't know if you want to have a chance to quickly introduce yourself, Susanna, before tomorrow. Are you still there? Just unmute yourself and you can just say hello to everybody.
Hello, everyone. I'm Susanna and I'm working remotely from here in Tuvalu. And I'm the solid waste management advisor. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Susanna. Okay, everyone. I'm just going to now attempt to share my screen. So just bear with me for a second. Right. Okay. Can you all see that? Could I get a response? I can't see you anymore because my screen is up.
You can see your slide, Graham.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Ivan. Okay, good morning again, everybody. Just a couple of things. As Jope said, this is not a lecture. This is a talanoa. So even though I can't see your faces, I still want to hear your voices. Ivan is there, so if you need to stop me or you want to ask a question because the mic is a bit difficult with the direction, please indicate to him and he will let me know that somebody wants to ask a question. We also have some arrangements we're going to be doing because sometimes we won't be able to answer the question straight away. It will take us maybe some time, or we don't have enough time. Or we need to seek additional information. So we will have what we're going to call like a parking lot. So if you have a question that doesn't get addressed, we will record it and we will try and circle back at the end of each day or when we have time throughout the day to answer those questions. So again, welcome everybody. And thank you again for all taking the time to come here. And I'm hoping that some of the headaches that people have from EIA, for environmental impact assessment, will be addressed with today and the next few days. The main thing to remember is environmental impact assessment is not scary. It's not meant to be scary. It's meant to be collaborative and it's meant to help you. So it's meant to help the developer. It's meant to help the country. It's meant to help the regulators so that they don't have the big headaches later on when developments fail, when people lose money on a venture because they put it in the wrong location or because they haven't managed to contain their environmental impacts adequately and have to pay lots of fines for cleanup operations. So please, as long as you we can get you to understand that, I think we've had a win. So yes, EIAs are not meant to be scary. Okay, so next, right. So this is session 1. This is the introduction. It's not going to have too much in there about actual technical stuff. It's just really to cover off on what the workshop's going to be about. You've already heard a lot of that. Some of you have already seen the program. And then it's just an introduction for those of you who may be not so familiar with SPREP about what we do beyond EIAs and how it all fits together. So very quickly, this is the schedule for the next 3 days. Try not to pay too much attention to the time column on the far left-hand side because obviously that is very flexible. We will take longer or less time to get through things depending on how interactive the session is and how much more information you guys want or how quickly we get through it. We also have designated moderators for each session. So STA has volunteered to assist for today. I think tomorrow I've been designated as one of the moderators and then maybe someone from Puma or others will be helping on day 3. But we will interchange that as we go. So first session is mine, followed by Puma and MNRE, who will explain the actual legislation behind EIAs and how they are applied within Samoa. So that will be a bit more technical, but I'm sure that Utalean will make it fun. She's very good. No pressure, Tamara. After lunch, the all-important lunch break, yes, as you already know, there are refreshments for those of you on campus at least. We will have a next session, which will have an overview of the development consent process. So there'll be a little bit more detail from Puma. Then again, you'll hear from me, and I'll be talking more about the EIA guidelines for coastal tourism that was developed between SPTO and SPREP. I won't go into too much of the technical side of the guidelines. What I'll be more talking about is how the guidelines can help you and why we're doing EIA, what's the real benefits from it. And Ivan can arrange for you to get a hard copy of the actual guidelines as well, if you haven't already received one. Then we will have session 5 and session 6 will be a wrap up. So session 5, we've already heard, for those of you who were there early this morning, we have a new World Bank consultant, Ofera, and she will just explain briefly about what her role is here on campus at SPREP. In day 2, for those of you, is going to get hopefully a little bit more interesting. For those of you from solid waste management and in MNRE and others interested in renewable energies, there will be presentations about that, as well as case studies from across the region, which will be kindly presented by SPTO, and the toolkits and guidelines that were mentioned by STA in regards to recovery from COVID for sustainable tourism. They will also be presented later in the day by SPTO and STA for tomorrow's sessions. So hopefully tomorrow's sessions will be a lot more involved in conversation as well. So yeah, we're looking forward to that. And our final day, we're going to be having, again, another recap. So I'll try and recap every day for those of you who may have forgotten what we talked about or want to come back and try and answer a question that we didn't get to the previous day. The final day will be mostly focusing on environmental management and monitoring plans or environmental management plans. These are a very important component of an EIA. An EIA is not just a one document that you get an approval and then you've delivered. It's also how you are going to manage your development going forward. So the environmental management plan is very, very important. So we'll hear about that, and then we'll also hear about how EIAs actually support multilateral environmental agreements. So it's not just about your development or the nation's legislation, it's about how EIAs also contribute to the wider environment and our obligations as citizens of the planet, and what our governments have committed to internationally. So there is a international standard, and under certain conventions, including the NMEA Convention, where countries agree that they will do EIAs and they will protect the environment through doing sustainable planning practices, and EIA being one of those main tools. So we will hear briefly, again, from one of my colleagues at SPREP, who will explain and try to demystify some of that interconnection. And that's really what we're here to do today, is to demystify the EIA process. Okay, so I did promise I will give you a bit of background about SPREP and who we are and what we do. For those of you who are junior, or those of you who haven't really had much to do with SPREP in the past. Okay, so SPREP, you might hear the word SPREP a lot. You might even see it in the Samoa Observer from time to time. It's just the Secretariat of the Pacific Region Environmental Program. And as you probably know, you're sitting in there now. For those of you on campus, our headquarters are in Samoa. We have other offices across the region, in Vanuatu, in Fiji, in RMI, and in Solomons. We have one representative there as well. And we currently have Susanna, who is sitting in Tuvalu until she gets to Samoa. And there's a few of us like myself who are currently stuck outside Samoa due to border closures, which is completely connected with the whole tourism issue and COVID recovery. So until the borders open, those of us who are stuck in Australia can't get back. So SPREP's been around for about 25 years, or a little over 25 years now. I joined when it was our 25-year anniversary. It's recognized as the lead on biodiversity, climate change, waste management, environmental monitoring, and governance. That's my department. It serves the Pacific region, so there's 21 member countries in the Pacific Islands, and we have some sponsoring member states who are what they call the metro countries. Our focus is on strengthening partnerships and cooperation amongst the islands and the territories and their people. So that's what we're doing here today as well. In the past, we were able to travel a lot and go out and do face-to-face trainings. We did trainings at multiple levels. We did trainings to school students, and we've done trainings with government officials. We've gone out to site and helped supervise. We've helped develop up guidelines for better practices. We also help governments when they're at the international negotiation stage. Joppe and myself will be helping, well, we are currently as well, but next week we will be assisting with the BBNJ, which is biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction, in which there is a component on EIA. It's a proposed new law for protecting biodiversity, as it says, beyond national jurisdiction. So it'll be a new UN convention if it was to get up. We'll see how that goes with the Ukraine. Maybe things won't go so well because we have Russia and America who have to come to the table and agree as well. But we do all sorts of things at SPREP at many levels. We have projects that we assist with in countries, training, as I said, guidelines. At the moment, most of this is all done virtually and through consultants and teams that we have based in countries, but we're still doing our best to serve our members. All of this is controlled by the vision that SPREP has. This was developed with the countries and the partners. So it's the vision for SPREP. It's a resilient Pacific environment, sustaining our livelihoods and natural heritage in harmony with our cultures. So very much in tune with the objectives of tourism as well, and on many of your departments. It's to try and ensure that the environment that we all live and love in is there for our children and to welcome others as well, so that they can experience the beauty of the islands. As I said, SPREP has 26 member countries. 21 of those are the Pacific Island countries and territories, and we have the 5 metro states who are the major donors. So that's Australia, New Zealand, France, USA, and the UK. And they meet every 2 years for what they call the SPREP meeting. And every second year in between that, or interim year, we have the executive board meeting. And basically they hold us accountable for what we have been delivering each year, and making sure that we're doing the best for our members, and making also sure that it aligns with the strategic plan, which we review every 5 years to adapt to the changing environment. And the environment being political as well as the environment, the natural environment. Out of that, we have a number of programs that have been created. The principal concern at the moment for SPREP is climate change. We have a cross-cutting theme. Since the ocean is basically the heart, lungs, and kidney, it's the powerhouse of the planet. So when the ocean's not well, the climate's not well, our fisheries are not well, even our islands aren't well. So these two are our main focus, and everything interlinks into those. We have regional goals then for each program. So we have Climate Change and Resilience Program, which sits within the PCCC, which is the building you're in at the moment. We have the Islands and Oceans Ecosystems. I advise you, if you haven't already worked with any of them, that you go and meet with some of these people. They're really, really good. They're really helpful for helping you to work out biodiversity plans and management plans for protecting the ecosystem. We have Waste Management and Pollution Control program, which is also on campus. We have a solid waste advisor who will be presenting tomorrow. We also have hazardous waste, and we have a whole Pack Waste Plus program, which is doing a lot of other capacity building and projects across the region, which sits within that program. And then there's environmental monitoring and governance, which is my program. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about that in the next couple of slides. So under environmental monitoring and governance, we are tasked with addressing Regional Goal 4. So Regional Goal 4 is 5 main subtasks in there, which is strengthening national sustainable development and planning and implementation. So that's one of the things we'll be targeting over the next couple of days. Improving national capacity for good environmental governance through technical assistance. Again, what we're trying to do over the next few days. Strengthen environmental data collection and monitoring. So this is another key area that we do, and you need to base any decision you make in any plan on robust data. So hopefully over the course of the next few days, you'll you'll grow to understand more and more about where you can source this data and how better to collect it, and how to collaborate better to store it for future projects as well. So EIA shouldn't be just viewed as a single entity where you do it as a standalone. The data you collect from that one project is actually really useful to everybody else as well. So think about that when you're designing your monitoring plans, what you're monitoring and how your monitoring plan can feed into other monitoring plans. So that way that benefits you too. So you've got data to compare against for yourself. And then strengthening synergies between science policy and traditional local knowledge. So again, this is what we're doing today. We're all coming together over the next few days and we're having a talanoa and sharing our experiences, our knowledge, and our questions, because we don't learn unless we ask. Right. So a little bit of a concept diagram. I find that they're sometimes very useful. So when we're talking about the environment, it's everything. Okay, so it's the land, it's the sea, it's the people, it's our activities, it's the natural environment. So it's the reefs, it's the forestry, but it's also your agriculture and your industry. It's even your landfill and your wastewater treatment. All of that is the environment because they all interact. It's your culture as well. Some developments can impact heavily on culture, both from a heritage perspective, but also changing the way people live. So this can sometimes cause a lot of animosity when a new development comes in. And I'm sure many of you are aware of that if you've dealt with developments, that often it's the people that are the biggest headache, as we've heard that term used. The environment's not going to get up and complain that you're doing something, that you're planning a new development, that the environment doesn't speak. It only lets you know because you realize that the fish aren't there anymore, or the water quality's declined, or you've lost the birds, or the land is polluted. And then again, that's usually only because people are letting you know. So people are really the key interlinker here between all of the impacts and the monitoring and what we classify as being a healthy environment or an unhealthy environment. So communication is always key. So what EMG does is we have a number of services that we provide. So we, as I've mentioned a number of times, we have policy and technical advisory support. We do capacity building and training, which we're doing today and the next couple of days. Tools and manuals and guidelines, which we'll be talking about. Networking and partnerships. Hopefully, as of the end of this training and even today, you will all start being better networked with each other. Part of demystifying the EIA process and making it easier and less of a headache is to know that person sitting in the other office is a human being as well. They're not your enemy. They're not there to make your life harder. So get to know them as a person. It's much easier to work with somebody when you're friends with them rather than thinking that they're there trying to make your job harder. Information and knowledge sharing. Again, that's why we're here. We're here to hear from you. I don't want to sit here and talk all day. Other work that we specifically do on EIA and SEA, or SEA is Strategic Environmental Assessment. It's not directly relevant to what we're doing today, but it can be. You can use it for a sector plan. You can develop up an SEA to look at tourism for your whole of nation or for the whole of region. So it's kind of like a bigger EIA, but without all the data collection. Sorry, I can just see someone messaging. Nope. Okay. All right. We have the EIA regional guidelines, which are a little bit more technical and directed at the regulators. So it helps regulators to review EIAs and know what to look for and how to actually even set up a terms of reference and help them to design a scope of works for an EIA, identifying what the key risks are and the steps involved in the process. It's a generic set of guidelines for the entire region, so it doesn't necessarily fit exactly with your legislation, but it does align with it. We've done it in both English and in French because we have French speakers in our territories. And then the one that we're going to be talking about mostly is the Environmental Impact Assessment Guidelines for Coastal Tourism Development in Pacific Island countries and territories, or as I just prefer to call them, the Coastal Tourism Guidelines or the Coastal guidelines, or the tourism EIA guidelines. You'll hear those terms used throughout the training. And you can also access those by visiting the PNEA, which is the Pacific Network of Environmental Assessment. The web address is here, and it will be shared with you throughout the presentations. And these slides will be made available at the end of the training as well. So there's a number of resources you can go to. You can also go to the national portals, which have a lot of information on them. The national environmental portals, Samoa has one themselves, and there's a lot of data on there. Some of it's freely available and some has to be requested. So the work that we do also feeds into the national environment management strategies that countries have. So we've developed a number of these across the region. The different hexagons that you can see there, or octagons, depict the status or where we're at. Some of them have actually progressed a lot further in the last couple of months. But basically, they're all the ones that we have developed for the region, and we're in the midst of, for some of them, going through and helping the countries update them, because they have to be updated every few years. As you can see, the one for Marshall Islands is due to start being updated at the end of this year. These are supported by state of environment reports. We've also developed a state of environment report guidelines. SPREP has been working with Samoa to do their SOE. We've done that in the past, supported all the countries that are listed there. This was initially work started back in the 90s, and then every few years we come back and we help the countries update them, because obviously the state of the environment changes. So you need to update it and see how you're progressing. So it's a kind of ongoing monitoring and reporting. This information is now being stored in a lot of cases in countries' environmental data portals. So that's another project known as the Inform project, which is run by a colleague of mine who I'll introduce shortly, or at least I'll show his picture. We have 14 national portals. So Niue, Nauru, Cook Islands, Solomon Islands, Samoa, Tonga, Fiji, FSM, Kiribati, Tuvalu, Palau, PNG, Vanuatu, RMI, Tokelau, and there's the regional portal. Now, the regional portal is generally open to anyone. Some of the national portals are protected, so you have to have user access, but they may have data there that is available to anyone. They're really useful. They're a really good starting point if you're trying to figure out what data has already been collected for an area. So this is our team. You've probably seen many of these friendly faces already around campus. There's a couple of us who are not on campus, myself being one of them, and my colleague Paul, who is stranded in the US, in Oregon. We also have our lovely Fasipa, who is our executive assistant, who is basically helps with a lot of the organization and administration within the office. She's off on maternity leave at the moment. And we have Vani, who is currently based in Fiji. Everybody else on those pictures there, they are on campus and probably in that room today, or have helped set it up, and you will see them around. Please feel free to go up and speak to them about what they do. I've tried to block them into the groups. So below Paul are the key team members for his Inform project. He runs that project for the data repository, but they also do a lot of other things, including the SOEs with countries. You can see Anastasia and Flavia there, who are part of the ACPMEA 3 coordination. That's another UNEP project that we're running through EMG, and that is funding this week's training. You'll also hear from Anastasia later this week. You'll hear from Ofera, who is the World Bank consultant. You'll hear from her later today. And Ivan, you have already met, I'm sure, or at least seen him when he stood up and talked about where the bathrooms are and when you go for food. He has basically helped pull this whole thing together in my absence, so I'm very grateful to him. He came on board just a few months ago in June last year. He's our technical support officer for EIAs, essentially, and he runs the PNEA, which is the Pacific Network Environmental Assessment portal. It's a hub, it's a community of practice where you can join free. There's no sign-up fee. You just have to request access, and once you're in there, you can get access to all sorts of EIA resource materials, training materials, watch old trainings that have been recorded, as well as download guidelines and even a few example EIAs. The work we all do does fit together. So SOEs, they inform the NEMS, or the National Environmental Management strategies for countries, which then feed into national plans, which then feed into MEAs. All of this is underpinned by environmental impact assessments and strategic environmental assessments. So when you're doing your environmental impact assessment, it's a good idea to be familiar with Samoa's NEMS, or National Environmental Management Strategy, as well as its national plans and objectives, because that's also a good way to promote your development, and it's also a good way for regulators to check to see if there's anything in a development that's sort of counter to the national objectives. So if you're planning your development, check to see how it aligns with these things. These documents exist and they are accessible, and SPREP is here to help you locate them as well if you have trouble finding them. That's a really quick summary of what we're going to try and cover this over the next few days, and what EMG and SPREP can do for you and has been doing. So I thank you all for listening and for coming along again. And I'd like now to welcome any questions. I haven't been able to see any hands raised, but I'm going to stop sharing my screen in a minute so I can actually see the video coming from the room. So thank you again.
Thank you, Craig, for that quick run through of what EMG and SPREP is all about. I'll open the floor up for some questions, please. I'll start. Can we again, Craig? You notice that there are differences in capacity within the room, so it's to bring their level up. Right? Now we talk about the map that shows about the different activities. Oil spill and.
Sorry, could you say that again, Joppe?
No, the slide that shows the activities, a slide that shows activities where fishing, oil spill.
Oh, yeah, I will bring that back up. The concept diagram, yes. Hang on a second.
I noticed that our sisters from Puma, they are new to this sustainable development. And that's the term being used there, emerging users. Can you see
that slide?
Yeah. Yep. Can you talk more about that? What does that mean?
Okay, so emerging uses. So, well, currently within the Pacific, we've got some emerging uses or potential uses. So things like deep sea mining, that little picture in the bottom right-hand corner, that's meant to be what it's depicting. So that's sort of deep sea exploration and potential collection of nodules. At the moment, they're just out there doing exploration, which is basically they're trying to determine the value of the minerals out there. And there are proposals for it to occur in a number of countries around the Pacific, but there are also proposals for it to occur outside territorial waters or outside EEZs. So that's in areas beyond national jurisdiction. But transboundary issues means that any plumes or what we're not quite sure of at the moment is what the extent of impact would be from deep sea mining. So how would it affect fisheries and migratory species, and how important are those deep sea habitats to feeding and turning over nutrients within the ocean? So those things are not quite clear at the moment, and there's a lot of debate. So deep sea mining is definitely an emerging issue, but other emerging issues could be marine genetic resources. It's an area basically biotechnology and drug discovery. There's a lot of interest from developed countries, especially now with COVID. They've recognized that there are organisms within the ocean that produce natural compounds, which are very good at combating diseases. So there are a lot of companies that are looking out to go what they call bioprospecting. So then how do we deal with that? So if they're doing it within your own territorial waters, then you probably need to have some sort of EIA or a permit at least for them to go out doing collection of your specimens. And that's partly as well what the BB&J is going to do is looking at trying to create mechanisms for controlling that when it's outside territorial waters. So they're some of the main emerging issues, but emerging is is very broad because it could be anything. It's new technology, basically. Anything that people decide that has never been tried before in your country, that's an emerging use. So renewable energies for some countries is quite new, and some of the technology in renewable energy. So I have seen trials around the world for wave energy converters, and most of them are not very successful. But if someone wanted to propose one of those, they would need an EIA.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you very much. So, colleagues, you see emerging uses. I think, for example, Samoa will have its own emerging issues, like in the Solomon colleagues, the people living in the highlands, they come and remove mangroves to live in the mangroves. So they call that as an emerging issues. So, and it's becoming chronic now. They are removing mangrove area just to come and relocate in there. So different countries have different interpretation of what emerging uses are. So we are looking at it at the regional level, talking about deep sea mining. So this is something new to this region. So I thought of raising that question for the sake of our incoming colleagues from Puma. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Let you know that there is a deep sea mining steering committee being set up in 2014. And that steering committee is chaired by the CEO and all the CEOs of other government and private corporations are also involved in the deep sea mining steering committee. So it's pretty much set up.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Any other question? Remember, this is a Talanoa. Yes, Craig.
If I may, yeah. I'll keep sharing this slide if you want me to, but I just wanted to come back to that point you made about the reclamation or the moving into the mangroves. I think that's a really important point, especially for tourism sector. That is an area in tourism where often we are looking at changing the coastal profile. So land reclamation in a lot of countries, and even in Samoa, people trying to fortify themselves against sea level rise, or because of restrictions in development areas, because land is customarily owned, people want to expand the area that they're allowed to build into. So the first thing they do is like, well, the ocean is where we want to have our resort, so they go forward. I mean, Tamasina is a prime example of changing the coastal landscape and reclaiming areas and removing mangroves. So yeah, it's a very, very important one that you raised there as including in emerging issues, because sea level rise is very much an emerging issue. It's becoming an ongoing problem, especially with our extreme weather events. So yeah, I just wanted to remind people that yeah, there are different types of emerging issues, and that's a very important one.
Thank you, Craig. Yes, any other question? Yes, there's one here, Craig.
Yes.
Still on that issue of the emerging uses, I'm just a bit confused because the diagram shows that it's referring to the deep part of the ocean, but you mentioned that you're referring to the coastal part. So I'm just trying to figure out, so what emerging uses, is it specifically for the deep part of the oceans or for the whole part?
Okay.
Excellent question.
Excellent.
Yes, Craig.
Yeah, wonderful question. And this is always an issue when you have a conceptual diagram. You can't have arrows pointing everywhere. So yeah, emerging issues is really just a trigger point for conversation. So one of the main ones that people often think of is deep sea mining, but emerging issues is, as Joppe said, is anything that is new, hasn't been done before in your region, or in your, when I say region, I mean locally within the island or within your sector. So even though the picture shows deep sea mining, and it's just a trigger point for us to start talking about emerging issues. So emerging issues can be a new type of wastewater treatment plant, switching over to a different type of industry, land reclamation. It's whatever hasn't been done before and you're unfamiliar with. So it's a broad term. It's not specifically linked to deep sea mining. Otherwise, the label would just say deep sea mining, and it's not purely for that location showing it offshore. It's just that we can't have arrows and text all over the picture. Yeah, it's just a concept diagram. It's not actually, you know, it's not depicting any specific location. But thank you for the question. Yes, and and I'm glad that you asked it.
In terms of tourism, thanks for that. In terms of tourism, one type of tourism activity that was introduced in Fiji last couple of years, where they usually travel from the land and enjoy the waves. To what do you call it, surfing. Yeah? But now they come the idea they want to locate a boat there to be stationary, and people go in there, party, diving, surfing at the same time. So we call that as an emerging uses, and it creates a lot of conflicts, colleagues. They don't like it because of pollution. And the cultural issues were affected because people are just, you know, what our colleagues do when they go, especially, you know, their issues. So I'll use that as an example from tourism perspective. Take a stationary boat, place it there. I was given the environment management plan to approve. And one thing that came up is the social issues. And then it was, I think, taken away. Yeah. Any other question? Yes, Mr.
Yeah, thanks, John. Thanks, Greg. Not really a question, it's more of a comment. It's more about the indicators involved in the M&E for sustainability. The challenge from a statistics point of view is accessing such data and indicators to measure any progress or lack of in terms of sustainability. So I guess it would be useful that such indicators are defined and agreed on and make it available in a database or something, so researchers and the like can access them freely, if that is possible, or if it's already been done, then we're not aware of it. Thank you.
Excellent point, Mr. Pongi. And when can you elaborate more on that excellent intervention on indicators? Can you share one example, please?
Well, I think the three pillars that we measure sustainability on, it's more general. I think it's environmental, social, and economic. But I think in terms of from a tourism perspective, that needs to be broken down further to measure going forward. I mean, we're all about sustainability and in our plans and everything, but there's no set indicators available to measure if we're progressing on such an issue.
Yes. Thank you. If I may contribute to this excellent point, some of the countries, they are putting in place standards, discharge standards. So end of the pipe standards to evaluate what are the correct amount of pollutants that needs to go into the receiving environment. It's regulated. And those kind of policies will address this indicator idea, indicator concept that Mr. Pongi is raising up. And yes, again, through the ACP-MEA project, we will be visiting MNRE to look into what are some of the standard areas that needs to be addressed here in Samoa, especially in terms of water and sanitation. So again, that is a start. Thank you, Mr. Pongi, for that. Any other question?
Jope?
Yes.
Sorry. It's an excellent question by Mr. Pongi. I just wanted to remind the audience that the Inform project, along with collecting the data, they have produced a number of guidelines, and the SOEs that they're doing, they do use indicators within them. And there's actually a environmental indicator guidebook, which we launched not too long ago. So it's probably a good idea that that we have a side conversation with the project manager, Paul, and Mr. Pongi, and others who are interested in sustainable indicators, because it's something that we could potentially assist in.
Thank you very much.
Any other question? Samoa Hotel Association.
Oh, we have a hand raised, Jope, from
Okay,
SPTO.
SPTO, yes, please. Tina, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Jope. That was a very good question from Kitiona, and yes, I just wanted to intervene here with regards to the work that we are currently going to embark on in terms of developing regional sustainability indicators. So yeah, that is actually a very good question, Kitiona, when we're going back to the Pacific Tourism Statistics Strategy that we launched last year. One of the very first activities that we are looking at a regional scale, really, sorry, not at national scale at the moment, but probably looking at the region at a regional framework, is that we will be consulting with all our member countries, and it'll be good to have the input of Samoa from both the private sector and the ministries across government in how we can align with the work that you've just mentioned there, Greg. So that's really, really good. And the objective really is to move beyond the economic indicators of tourism success, but perhaps look at the social and environmental indicators of success or failure in tourism. So that's something that's very exciting. And we've got New Zealand government supporting that work. We're just waiting on our new team for the Research and Statistics Division, and they'll start on that work. So it'll also be a good opportunity for SPREP and SPTO to collaborate on that. I just thought I'd mention that.
Thank you, Tina. And may I say that you look well. You look well.
You look handsome, Jope, as always. But thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Thanks, Jope. Can I also add into our discussion with the point that was raised by Kitiona? It's one of the things that we have discovered with one of our projects with Samoa Tourism. I'm so glad that this training is taking place for the tourism sector. Jope, what do you think of like the tourism sector strategic environmental assessment for Samoa? Because that will be very helpful to then come up with the data for the environmental, social, and economic indicators.
Thank you. Thank you.
Something to look forward to.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And that leads me to the next point of discussion. Any question from that side, please? Before I... No? Okay. Hands up those who know what strategic environment assessment is. Strategic environment assessment. No. So it was raised by Craig and again raised by Farah. Craig, you raised this strategic environment assessment. Share with us, enlighten us in say within 2 minutes. What is this about? What is this about?
Within two. Yep. Okay.
Yes.
I'll do my best to, so within 2 minutes. Okay, so strategic environmental assessment, or SEA, as I mentioned. Yes, it's like a brother to EIA, but at a much higher level. So rather than focusing on a particular project, it focuses on policies, plans. What's the other P? I've had a mental blank at the moment. But it's generally focused on government policies, plans, and proposals. So it's not a particular project. It's not a particular location. It might be how you want to develop up where you're going to invest your money in for tourism, or where you're going to designate as your land use areas for particular development, or working out what areas of protection that you want to establish, or you want to work out how a new policy on health may impact the entire community. So it's a very much a stakeholder engagement led type of assessment, and you engage with the main key stakeholders, which are the government agencies that are directly affected by that new policy or plan or proposal, and the industries, and then the community as well. So it's not so much about going out and collecting data on the ground, because you base your decisions on existing data and work out what gaps you have and what data you're going to need to collect in order to answer the questions that you that are raised during the SEA. So you might go, oh, we're not sure how this new policy is actually going to affect young children if we tell them that they all have to have vaccinations. So then you might want to do an SEA on that and see how you're going to get all the children vaccinated, and then how you're going to get the outreach happening and what impact that might have if children who are not vaccinated are allowed to attend school. So you might do a little mini SEA on that. For tourism, you might be looking at how you might implement a new policy on sustainability or sustainability metrics and how that would impact the industry in your country. So SEAs are related to EIAs in the sense that you go through a very similar process of scoping and then doing the consultations and then writing up your reports and then having a review, but they're not as in-depth as an EIA. Hopefully that explains it. And we have in 2 minutes, and we have a set of guidelines that we developed up in 2020 now. Yeah, they're a couple of years old now.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you very much for that contribution. A good example which I can share with your colleagues. Let's take, for example, the tourism authority says, okay, we build an international airport in Savai to promote tourism. And this is where this tool is very, very important. Is it a strategic move? Decision maker said, yes, it's a strategic move. Okay, let's do an assessment. Let's do an assessment to prove that that decision you made is strategically safe. So that's a good example which I can relate to in terms of this training.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Joe. I raised the issue because we're, as an authority, we're in a bit of a dilemma at the moment. We've been challenged by the new government to achieve 250,000 visitors as fast as we can, but achieve it in a sustainable manner. So that's the balance we're trying to find, and I think we really need those indicators to help us achieve that balance.
Thank you. This is another separate talno which we can engage with the Tourism Authority and maybe some senior officials from MNRE and PUMA, because they will be part of the process in case things trickle down to the ground level. Yes. Thank you for it. Yes, have we exhausted our talent for this particular session? No? No? You liking it? Okay, good. Craig, can you show another one? That slide where you show the RMI names.
The RMI names, yep, bringing it up.
I'll test our colleague this morning. So
just
RMI names. Okay, that one.
Yep.
My question to you this morning, colleagues, you've got the names here. So what do we call this document here in SAM? Yes, somebody has a answer. Yes.
The National Environment Sector Plan.
Yes, the National Environment Sector Plan. So when we talk about National Environment Management Strategy, it's just the same as the National Environment Sector. I really like that plan. I really like that plan. So that's how we call it here in Samoa, and that's how they call it in Marshalls. And in Kiribati, they call it the Kiribati Integrated Environment Policy. Yes. Yes. Vanuatu, they call it the NIPEP, the National Environment Policy and Implementation Plan, NAPIP. So it talks about the sector plan. Sector plan. So for this one, focuses only on environment, but it has elements of tourism in it. Okay. Well, there will be more time for us to talk over these things. So pack your question aside, and then yes, we are going half day on Friday, but we can continue full day if you agree. Set. So we'll move on, colleagues, and Craig, what's next in our agenda?
Up next is our lovely presenters from PUMA and MNRE, who are going to explain the legislation for EIA within Samoa. So looking at both the Puma Act